yeah, a lot of people are just like, oh, that's great when you're bringing that into production. And I'm like, ooh, like, probably maybe never. It's just that stuff taking even what looks like a finished working prototype, which is, I love building those and it's so fun, but that's just so many miles and kilometers or whatever unit system you want to use away from an actual like production ready part.
Hey everyone, I'm Jonathan, maker, inventor, designer, and Autodesker. Welcome to Shop Talk. Today, we're speaking with Charlie Pyott from Pyott Design. Charlie has a really interesting background that informs all the cool work he does now. We're going to learn about his process, how all his experience feeds into the cool projects he does. And if you're interested in this topic, you're going to learn a lot. So let's dive in. All right, Charlie Pyott, welcome.
Hey, Jonathan.
So for those who don't know you, would you tell us a little bit about your channel, about yourself?
Sure, sure. So I'm an industrial designer by trade. Yeah, background is basically pretty extensive in 3D animation and moving on to sort of production parts and creating real world objects is sort of my specialty these days. So
And you have a YouTube channel where you document a lot of this stuff that seems to have blown up in
yeah,
short order.
yeah, it was very unexpected. Yeah, I sort of started the channel about a year ago, just sort of putting around with personal projects, and I sort of felt like there wasn't a lot of sort of detailed sort of coverage of the industrial design field, and really the process of industrial design wasn't too well documented in the YouTube world. So I really wanted to focus in on that and sort of dig deeper into process and yeah, just the actual art of building sort of functional devices. So
Yeah, it's a really cool stuff. And watching it, I immediately thought back to when I was like in high school and how much that would have benefited me because I didn't even know industrial design was a profession when I was a high schooler. But you've made it really accessible and kind of explained the process to people in a way that's easy to digest, but also you get pretty deep into some complex stuff with using Fusion and other products and mass customization. It's very like cutting edge stuff, but digestible. So you've done a great job with that.
thanks, really appreciate it. Yeah, a little bit on my background. For my own way, I didn't even know industrial design existed as a trade. That is something you could really do. Growing up, I always thought you could be sort of a mechanical engineer or electrical engineer or that sort of thing, but I really didn't know it existed as a sort of trade you could actually specialize in until I was well into my late 20s. So yeah, it was just really, I don't know, part of my channel is also just raising awareness of that sort of that job that you can actually go out and do in the real world. Yeah, one of the big things that helped me about the YouTube channel has been sort of really getting my process dialed in. There's a lot of things I do on my own end that I don't really think about at this stage, and they aren't really necessarily the best way to tackle a problem. And sort of documenting that through the YouTube channel has really helped sort of question, like, why am I doing this? Is this the best way to do this? Should I do more sketching, more clay models, more modeling, like really dialing in those sequences and seeing what works best for different projects has been just a great experience for me too. So yeah, it's been fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, teaching is I don't know, maybe this is a cliche, but teaching gives you perspective that you just don't get if you're on your own working. Like I used to teach grad school, I taught architecture, and I would get questions. You come in with a set of assumptions, right? And then you explain this is how this is done. And then you're talking to smart people and they say, well, why is it done that way? And then you realize, oh, this is just some professor told me this years ago, and I've just
Right.
been assuming it's true.
Just baked into your brain somehow. Yeah. You never
Yeah.
really think about it. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Couldn't agree
And
more.
then right. And then you have to, you develop your own process and all that stuff. So it's funny. It's like you've got a, I don't know, with social media, you sort of have a ready-made teaching audience. You've got like a global classroom. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely 100% on. Yeah, and I don't know, I kind of like it. There's a thing with YouTube and that kind of content, whereas you really have to be merciless about cutting out
Yeah.
extra fluff. And as soon as you start sort of going off on tangents, you sort of the time of the video or the content you're making just gets sort of out of control really quickly. And I think that's also helped me a lot too, where it's, more about coming up with a narrative and like sort of, what's the story I'm trying to tell and what are the high points and low points I really need to hit and stick to. Yeah, it's been really nice from just sort of a, even a storytelling perspective about coming up with an arc about how to actually make something or make a product. So yeah, it's been really fun adventure and yeah, something I feel like I'm, getting a little better at every time I make a video. So I love it. It's been great. So
Yeah, and you mentioned that you got started with maybe motion graphics,
yeah, yeah.
3D design for graphics, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. No, I started with 3D animation way back in the almost late 90s using Maya, the beta of Maya on like SGI workstations way, way back in the day. So yeah, that's also sort of a weird thing that's really come in handy. After several years of doing that professionally, I sort of pivoted more. Yeah, for myself, I just wasn't quite as satisfied with it. I really love making physical products and things that, come out into reality a little bit more. So I pivoted out of the 3D animation field and got more into yeah, industrial design and sort of via production. So it's really weird. I kind of thought that would be sort of a not a wasted part of my life, but something that wouldn't come in useful ever again. But yeah, it's kind of come back around and really helped let me communicate complex ideas through animations and motion graphics and whatnot. It really makes it sort of critical almost in some cases to communicate complicated concepts very quickly and efficiently in a way that's easy to take in or easier to take in at least. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge part of what you do as a designer. I think that's something that gets lost a lot with people that are maybe new to it or, just kind of getting interested. Um, it's not just about the artifact or, the design of whatever the thing is you're working on. It's the communication aspect. And if you don't get that right, nobody cares. Nobody wants your thing. Nobody's going to pay you to design the thing that you're working on, right?
yeah, absolutely. And in most sort of the stuff I do for social media is kind of unique. I can kind of do my own thing, but in the real world, it's really about being able to do that communication. Like you said, yeah, you're constantly having to hand things off to other designers, other people in other production aspects, people designing tooling, people designing electronics, what have you. And if you can't sort of share and quickly and effectively communicate whatever your design intent is, that can get lost very quickly. And you can sort of, yeah, not, I wouldn't say lose control, but, lose your level of input you're having on a project can sort of dissipate real quickly if you're not able to, yeah, effectively communicate what your goals are and what you're bringing to a project.
Yeah, there's a lot more crossover between, engineering, product design, and, the media entertainment industry than I think most people are aware of. We tend to see sort of some glossy marketing material for something or whatever it is. But the fact of the matter is, all along the way, like you said, the people that you're trying to convince, people you're trying to communicate to, these are skills that are essential to getting that right. So yeah, I could see why you're good at what you do.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it. Took me quite a while to get there. It's yeah, it's definitely been, I don't know. I've been doing this sort of graduated from Art Center College of Design in 2008. So yeah, it's been quite a few years and it's amazing. Yeah, I still definitely have blind spots and skills I want to improve on as I move forward as a designer, but yeah, it's all a growing process and it's really sort of great. For myself, I've worked at a lot of sort of small companies and startups and the like, which sort of push you into wearing multiple hats. And it's been really nice to sort of have that background just because the growth potential there is so great. You'll turn around and have to sort of figure out how to program stepper motors for some interactive piece. And then you're doing a full-on production part that needs, traditional injection molding and tooling and electronics and whatnot, where you're more concerned with like your bill of materials and per unit costs and whatnot. So I don't know. I think very lucky that I've gotten exposure on so many different small projects and or not small projects per se, but small companies where I can really sort of dig into a bunch of different aspects of the design process.
Yeah, could you kind of walk us along that journey?
Sure.
You get out of college, you what is it, land a job or you get some contract work? Like how did that
Yeah,
go?
yeah. So I started off, I was doing more sort of industrial and entertainment stuff for a while. I worked at a company called Wet Design for a couple years, and they do sort of water features and sort of environmental things along those lines. And after that, I transitioned more into just straight up contract consulting, where I was doing sort of, yeah, just to get picked up by companies that wanted to, develop out a, line of concepts for computer hardware, more consumer goods, consumer electronics, that sort of thing. Did that for several years across a number of companies. Then I eventually landed at a startup called MetaMason, and their specialty was doing sleep apnea masks that were custom created for each individual. So instead of having a one size fits all mask or a small, medium, large type situation, we developed out a system where you would 3D scan someone's face and it would actually generate a custom nasal sleep apnea mask. And that was just really eye-opening for me. Sort of, it's just a radically different way of designing a product and a thing. And I think it's really going to become a direction the industry goes in a number of fronts in the future. Just that sort of customizable one-off products that are taking in scan data or some other sort of performance data from someone and then generating a custom product. A market really hasn't been explored too far. And all the tools are really right there. The cost of 3D printing has come down so dramatically that starts being competitive. And just the software ecosystem to do it is really right about there for that to really start, I think, blowing up as far as the direction the industry is going to go.
Yeah, I mean it's easy to imagine something like a CPAP mask being necessary for that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And then when we look at the material on your channel, there's also the VR headset
yeah, yeah,
adapter. Another thing where you could imagine like, well, that makes perfect sense because everybody's, especially this region of everyone's face, I'd imagine
yep,
is dramatically different from
yeah,
person to person.
yeah,
Where
yeah.
getting that right and actually making something comfortable that presumably you're going to be wearing for a while makes a lot of sense. What other applications do you see for that?
I mean, really, it's definitely a market segment where for a flat panel display, you obviously don't need custom scanned generated, something. But I think it's really for sort of long-term performance and wearables. Sort of the closer it gets to you and the more sort of on your body it is, the product itself is, the more that starts making sense. So I think, diving masks, anything medical device wise that you're going to have to wear for a long time. The whole prosthetic market for the medical devices, that could really change a lot of people's lives for sure. Um, yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of, you can go so many different ways, sunglasses even that are just sort of custom formed to your face, ski goggles, anything that really you have on for a long time that you just want that extra level of comfort and performance. And I think there's some potential sports analytics side to that too, where you can take in like swing data of a tennis racket and then sort of develop out a special racket form that, better performs for an individual. And that starts getting into sort of the more premium competitive and performance aspects of it. So yeah, I think there's a lot of unexplored territory there that really is going to be fun to sort of figure out where that fits and where it doesn't. It's going to be really exciting.
So you were contracted by a company to come up with this customizable interface. Did I get that
I
right, or was that
was
just a personal project?
No, I was hired by the startup MetaMason, and we sort of
Okay.
developed out this whole system that would basically generate those products from scan data. And
For,
unfortunately, on
for,
that one, it was I feel like it was a few years before its time. At that point, there really wasn't a lot of there were low cost 3D scanners, but there wasn't sort of all in one solutions. And nowadays, I mean, the stuff I do on my channel is just uses an iPhone Face ID and just captures that structured light scan just right off your phone, and there's no other hardware needed, which is just baffling. Like,
so cool.
yeah, it's really amazing that that stuff's all like potentially sitting in your pocket already, and you can just go out and use it for stuff like that. And yeah, I think that's there's just so many little components you don't think about for doing those custom on-demand products that sort of all need to be in play, from capturing systems and scan data to 3D printing, and the software side is a huge one. And yeah, that's sort of one of the things I feel like was really exciting to sort of figure out. We started using graphic programming languages to sort of generate those products, which let me, as a designer who is very bad at programming, actually, create these generative systems. And yeah, if you don't have that, you start building these layers where it's really tough for the designer to actually execute and experiment, I guess, is the biggest thing, where you can't go to a development crew and say like, hey, could you guys do like 200 of these variations really quick for me? It's something you really, as a designer, want to have as much hands-on input, or at least experimentation, that you can physically see yourself. That aspect is from the software side, I think, is really starting to getting to a place that's pretty interesting right now. So
That immediately makes me think of the Fusion's ability to work with meshes and with solid
yep, yep.
components, right? Solid geometry.
Yeah. And a lot of that is, yeah, I mean, Fusion's, parametric modeler, or has the capability of doing parametric modeling really, really effectively. And that's really what that is going through and sort of defining steps to generate your part. That's what that programming aspect is, and that experimentation aspect is. And yeah, no, Fusion's amazing for that. You can bring that scan data right in and mess around with it and have those sort of objects and different geometry types all in play, which is, yeah, not something you can do in a lot of different CAD programs out there. So yeah, it's been a
Yeah.
really great tool to use going forward.
Yeah, meshes, historically speaking, have been a nightmare to work with if you're doing
Yeah,
anything prismatic, right, or
yeah,
doing anything with parametric modeling.
yeah, for
Um,
sure.
I worked in kind of speculative architecture for a long time, and there was always this, like, basically when there's a mesh involved, you've
Yeah,
thrown something over the wall and you can't
it's
touch it.
out. Yeah, yep.
You're done. And like if you need to bring something from that back in, you're starting from scratch
Yeah,
and
yeah, you're
modeling it to
rebuilding.
try to, because you're not going to be able to do Boolean operations or, God forbid, sculpt anything, or,
Right, right.
it's just kind of out of your hands at that point.
Yeah, and I mean, I run into this all the time where I'm doing, I do a lot of work for artists as well, where I'm 3D scanning sort of sculpture work that's going to get scaled up or refabricated in a different material or what have you. And yeah, there's a lot of that is you're getting meshes that may just be broken shells, or just not, like they're just parts that are coming together and are just sort of slap, they're not really built together to be manufactured in any way. And yeah, having that power to be able to sort of go through and like, oh, okay, let's extract these features and figure out how to actually update this to a point in the computer where it's, in a manufacturable state is really nice and really powerful for sure.
Yeah, it's fun. So you mentioned we were on like the beta version of Maya back in the 90s,
Yep, yep.
so you're much older than me because I started using Maya in like 2002
Oh
when it was
yeah, that's
super well established and like,
no, I'm old school. No, come on, to get it. Yeah.
yeah, but no, it's funny though because I got jobs doing, visual stuff, 3D animation in Maya that I had no business getting.
Oh,
But at the
same thing.
time,
Yeah.
there was
Yeah.
nobody else doing it, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, I did this one thing. It was a GPS animation for this, like, for some little clip in a kids movie.
Right.
It's on it for like a week and it took like 5 days to render.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was on screen for like 3 seconds. And I was like, that was the month's rent.
Yes. Yeah.
And then not 2 years later, it was just like, there's nobody's doing that.
Yeah.
It's all become, this totally like kind of, its own professional world, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, that was definitely so. Like I think I mentioned, I started off on like SGI workstations, and it transitioned over into Windows NT, and that basically just like opened the floodgates as far as sort of both development speed and competition. So like all of a sudden it's like everyone could run, software, all these small production houses could run it. And it's like all of a sudden my massive 20 hours of experience were not enough. So yeah, it's it was that was yeah, that was definitely a crazy time. What was funny is I actually started off before Maya on a program called Power Animator, um, which I was like, man, this is like this is a gnarly program. It was before a lot of the UI standards had been figured out. It was a different time, for that sort of thing. And then later on, I got jobs doing Class A surfacing using Alias, and is like, oh, like I went to school for that, and it was like first day of class. I'm like, oh, this is Power Animator, and they're like, no, no, this is Alias. And I'm like, no, I've used this before. It's Power Animator, and they're like, no, anyway. Yeah, it turns out that program essentially became Alias, and yeah, what a
Oh,
standard
wow.
Class
You
8.
really are old school, man.
Oh man, it's kind of disturbing how
Yeah.
much I've been around this stuff.
It's the
So
standard now. Class A surfaces, if you want to do anything in automotive or whatever, I mean, that's it's about as good as it gets.
yeah. That's another one of those, like, I'd say I'm very mediocre at it, but it's definitely one of those skill sets that's just a whole other, like, you don't even know about it. And then you kind of meet people or get into that world a little bit, and it's just like, wow, this is intense as far as, defining mathematically perfect geometry for, production parts that are going to be, millions potentially of these objects are going to get made. So you want to make absolutely sure it's absolutely perfect. Yeah, it's a whole other discipline that you don't even know exists unless
Oh,
you're
totally.
kind of in the world. And
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
funny too. I'm sorry.
no, I did when I was doing a lot of contract work when when I was in my 20s, like just out of school and stuff. And I got a contract to design to do 3D models of shoes for this like clothing line, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so they came to me with some really good drawings, like good illustrations, like top side, all the different views you'd need
Sure.
of
Yeah, the
the
tech back,
shoe.
all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, oh yeah, I could totally do this,
Yeah.
So I take it and I start like I'm looking at the drawings and I start doing it. And then about 3 days later, without much sleep, I called them and I was like, I can't do this. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. And I don't know anyone who can.
Yeah.
And like,
No.
you don't realize like until you've tried it, you might
Yeah.
look at something with some complex geometry and just think, oh yeah, you just kind of sculpt the thing or whatever.
Right,
Then you
right.
try it yourself and it's like, oh wow, this is
Whole
a
different thing.
world
Yeah.
all of its own.
Yeah, and there is a lot of that too, where it's I don't know, I've always considered myself kind of a weaker, like, an industrial design sketcher. I have friends that can just sit down and just draw these beautiful, beautiful sketches that really make you excited about like a concept, which is incredible. But yeah, I've definitely, as someone who's more 3D modeling focused, I've been in a lot of situations where I'll get these, beautiful sketches, and I'm like, this none of this will work. Like, everything is like, there'll be a side view that's all stretched out and looking really cool, and then a top view that's like beautiful and has all these great lines, and none of the lines like line up, and then you model
Yeah,
it out and it just looks like absolute garbage.
yeah.
So
That
yeah,
nothing corresponds to the whole.
no, no. And that's just a whole other discipline. It's a whole other art. Is just making models that look good, first of all, and then fit all the hardware and hard points into them, and then are also sort of, again, into that class A, like, mathematically beautiful, if you even want to go that route. So some companies just don't. But yeah, it's funny. Yeah. And again, with that surfacing stuff, it's like learning color theory a little bit, where it's like you don't even notice it. You can go your whole life and not even see it. And then as soon as you learn it, like half the world is just like ruined for you, because you look at stuff and you're just like, that's no, what are they doing?
Exactly.
The tangency on this is garbage. And it's just like, yeah, it just sort of, it makes you see stuff that you may not want to see, because yeah, but it is really cool to have that sort of like quote unquote superpower, to see all these like elements around you and all that, the work that went in or wasn't put in on different projects. So yeah.
It's one of those things. It's an invisible art.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
what I mean by that is if you're just a normal person, you don't know anything about surfacing,
yeah,
you can pick out the good one, right?
yeah.
If
No,
one that's got
absolutely.
bad surfacing and one that doesn't, they could, if you squinted, they might look exactly like the same thing, but almost everyone would be able to point and say that one's better than that one.
Right. Yeah. This, like, oh, something about the quality of this is better. And it's like, yeah, it's just like the highlight is just beautiful on it. And you look at the sort of quick one that was just knocked out, and it's like, yeah, it doesn't quite come together as well. And yeah, to your point, it's one of those things where it's yeah, it's sort of like the premium products sort of stand out for a reason, or or unknown reason for a lot of people, where they can't quite put a finger on why something's really nice and elegant, and but it's there, and it's it's a lot of effort and a lot of hours that you have to put in to get to that point. So
Yeah, I mean, how much of that is, physical prototyping? Because earlier you were talking about exhibit design,
sure, yeah, yeah.
active exhibits, spaces, that kind of stuff. When you're dealing with those things, you're pretty much stuck in the virtual world until the thing's built.
Yes, yeah,
I think
yeah,
it's one of the reasons, like, architects usually don't get good until they're about to retire, because it takes that long to, like, be able to connect those things in the space. But if you're
yeah,
talking about industrial design, you know, you can model something, print it out on your Formlabs Form 3 in the background there. The next day, you've got an exact replica of
yeah.
the thing that you were designing, right?
Oh, totally game changing. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's insane. And to your point, yeah, it's really tough to like figure out on the computer what's working and what's going to work in real life. And I mean, it happens to me all the time. Like I'm like, oh, this looks great, and I'm like zoomed in, looking at some like fillets that are actually the size of like a half millimeter that won't even be relevant. And then no, you print it out, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is awful. Like the proportions are wrong. It's all chunky and weird looking. And yeah, the ability to just, like you said, be able to just like, snap your fingers practically and get a thing in real life that you can see is phenomenal. And yeah, that's again, when I was in school in 2008, 2009, like graduating, yeah, I mean, I did like a computer mouse that was like that big SLA print that was like really bad quality. And I think that was $500 or
right.
something. And now
And it's
it's
like
like,
falling apart.
yeah, it is like yellowed and awful and bubbles and everything. Anyway, but yeah, now you can upload that to a print house and get it back in a few days for $30, $20, and that's if you have your own printers. Obviously, you can get that down just very, very, very small amount of money. And the yeah, the technology there too is phenomenal. I mean, you're starting to see LCD printers are becoming more and more popular, and those things can knock out really nice parts. And you're talking about minutes potentially instead of hours and hours. And yeah, the powder printing, SLS printing, filament printing, it's, all that stuff's getting to this high level of sophistication and affordability. Like those machines used to cost $500,000 and now it's, you can buy things for under $100 in a lot of cases that are really able to put out parts that are really exciting and usable for either prototyping or for use. Depends how you want to spin it up. So
Yeah. Yeah. Do you tend to just go straight to CAD and then, additive to proof out your projects? Do you
yeah,
like
yeah, I'm
spend a little
stupid
time
that way.
sketching and, like, yeah.
Yeah, like I should do a lot more sketch development, and I just don't. A lot of stuff I'll just kind of work out in my head, and I'll just be like, I just want to. The sketching to me becomes sort of like, oh, this is just wasted time. I don't want to do that, and it's really not. It's a lot of the stuff that you do in the sketching, like again, to your point earlier, it's like you think you understand something and then you actually go to do it and you don't understand it. So at least for me. So yeah, the sketch process is something I've done more and more of. As, again, in the videos, I was like, oh, I'm gonna do like, honestly, I was adding sketch process stuff because I'm like, oh, this is something that is a part of the classical process and something I should show, but not something I would usually use as much. And I was like, oh man, this is actually really good. I need to do more sketching. So it is very important, but I still do lean a lot into the straight up CAD work, and that flow. But yeah, on the last video I did actually, that was I hadn't done clay models, God, in years. And doing that, I made the video game controller basically and did it out of a clay model. And I'm like, oh wow, I never would have, added the features I added, never would have had the form I had I not done it in clay. If
Yeah.
I had just gone into like a either CAD or Sketch in that case, it would have just wouldn't have worked, or it would have worked, but it wouldn't have been as effective as it was. So it's yeah, knowing when to deploy the right process and the right steps when is, half the battle. So
I think a lot of that is more, this is just in my experience, but it's more psychological.
mhm.
it's not that you couldn't go into the model and like dramatically, you can do 3D model, print the thing, hold the thing, and then you say, oh, it needs this feature or
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
whatever it is. It's not so much that you couldn't do that as you don't think about it unless you're working with something in your hands.
right, right.
Because once you've made that model, there are certain decisions that you're just psychologically not going to let go of,
That is
right?
very true. Yeah, yeah,
Because it's just because there's like it's almost like the sunk cost fallacy. It's like, I've
yep,
already done this thing, this works, that's just how it's going to be.
yeah,
Whereas, yeah, if you're starting over like with clay or with foam or sketching or whatever it is, the you don't have that same like you don't it doesn't feel like a sunk cost because you can just move the paper, get another sheet of paper and start over, and it
yeah.
doesn't feel like you've invested anything in it, right?
No, that was super well said, and that's spot on. Where it's like you can definitely go down a path and just not be able to come out of that path because you've already, yeah, it's a sunk cost fallacy, and it's just you've or gotten used to a form or what have you, and it just might not be the right solution. But it's tough to like turn around and say like, oh, I got to scrap this and try something else because isn't working.
Yeah.
And it
People
is,
like it's just data, right?
yeah,
This is
yeah,
just
exactly. It's
zeros
like,
here.
but
Like
it's
of
I
the
don't know what it
model.
is. Yeah, I think it is something too, where it's like you get visually used to seeing the thing you're working on, and you get so attuned to that you get attached to it and you can't let it go. And it's tough to be able to just be like, no, this isn't working. But
Well, you
yeah,
also,
it's yeah.
I mean, there's another issue there with when it comes to clients. Like you've probably seen this too, but
Oh yeah, yeah,
something I've noticed is when you present something to a client, and if you did it all in a model and you show it to them, they just like kind of immediately think this is the thing. It's going to
yes,
be this, right?
yeah,
Whereas if you do something stupid like just run it through a filter that makes it look like sketched lines,
yeah,
they're way more like amenable to the conversation.
yeah,
Like, oh, if we move this here, like let's change that, and like could we add this thing? And it's just psychology. It's got
yeah,
nothing
yeah.
to do with the thing itself, right?
Oh, Jonathan, it's burned me so many times in life where I immediately go into like I'll do like key shot 3D modeling wherever, do key shot renderings, and like that's my process, show it to people, and it's just like this isn't what we want at all. It's like I don't like this. And it's like, well, it's just a concept, it's okay.
Yeah,
But yeah, if you show that same thing with a sketch filter on, it's like, oh
right.
cool, okay, and it's like let's play with it. And it's like, yeah, let's
Yeah,
do that.
yeah,
Yeah, it is weird. It's really weird. I don't know why that is, but yeah, I mean, it's once you start showing that thing that approaches photorealism even a little bit, all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is a real thing and
yeah.
we can't change it. And it's
He's
like,
already
no,
done. He's already
yeah,
made all the decisions for
yeah,
it.
yeah,
We're not
yeah,
part of his process at all. When it actually maybe takes more time to do a sketch of the thing that I could just show
right.
you. Like this is actually much closer to what this would look like if you were okay with it,
Yes,
right?
yes, exactly. And that's sort of the mentality I have, but it's and a lot of that is just knowing with some clients that's okay. And they're like, oh, I get what you're doing. And other times it's like you really have to know where your client or even your boss or whoever, your team is coming from and be able to sort of communicate to that language that needs to be spoken. And it's tough to figure out. And I constantly misread it and think like, oh, this will be fine. And it's like, oh, they were looking for something more developed, or no, they were looking for something looser. And it's a back and forth. And yeah, something that
Yeah,
you work to get good at. But I don't think there's any magical trick to do it. Yeah, I don't know. And yeah, segueing into that too, there is a lot of like I've gotten a lot of this with the video game, the controller I did. Yeah, a lot of people are just like, "Oh, that's great. When are you bringing that into production?" And I'm like, "Ooh, like, probably maybe never."
I mean, maybe never.
Yeah, it's just that stuff taking even what looks like a finished working prototype, which is I love building those and it's so fun, but that's just so many miles and kilometers or whatever unit system you want to use away from an actual like production ready part.
A client comes to you and says, "I want you to design a better mousetrap," right? The mousetrap could be anything. It could be, a flashlight, a spatula, something that's ubiquitous that we just kind of, it's always basically the same thing. But you get the opportunity to start over and maybe try to make it better. So what would that product be? What would you pick to try out?
Yeah, this is a tough question. As I said earlier, it's like I really love sort of jumping between different disciplines. So it's like this is the hardest type of thing for me to answer where it's like what's the one thing? And it's like, oh, It's all the
Yeah,
things.
one of many things.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is the reason I asked this question as I look at your game controller project,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's something that's there's a very cool thing for an industrial design topic, right? Because like it's interactive, it's got a set of things it needs to do, it needs to be expandable to the future. If that's your answer, I'm fine with it. But
Yeah,
if
yeah.
anything else
No,
comes to
that's
mind.
yeah, yeah. Well, the immediate project I'm working on after I'm doing my custom VR mask, and then I'm going to do revisit an old product I did, which was a customizable mouse that basically had a locking mechanism in the center and let you move parts of the mouse around and relock it so you could really customize it. I'm going to be going back and doing that, and yeah, that's right now is probably the thing I'm most excited about. I think yeah, I mean this is sort of the fun thing about the channel I'm doing right now is like for the one of the first times I get to do that stuff where it's like every day I get to say like, oh,
Yeah,
what's the thing I want to design? What do
you're
I
already
want to
doing
do?
it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like I get to like literally knock down the list of things.
I don't play video games, but I want that mouse.
Yeah,
So
no, I know. I had so much fun making
I'm gonna
that.
put in a pre-order.
I don't play it as much or play anything as much as I used to, obviously. And I'm like, oh, this is just fun. It just reminds me of something that came out of the 1990s, but
Yeah.
it's somehow current. I don't know. It was really fun making that. But yeah, thanks so much. But and yeah, I don't know. I think longer term, yeah, maybe go back into even the software tools. I think there's like a lot of important work that's going to happen with the ID field and software in the future. And that's something I'd love to be a part of still. I do have a background in UI UX design, and that's still something I do enjoy. So I would love, yeah, to see a future where some of these concepts have you know tools to keep growing with these new concepts we've been talking about. So that's a great something I would like to be a part of in the future as well, potentially. So
Yeah, I mean, the keyboard really feels like a vestigial organ at this point, doesn't it?
right, yeah, yeah.
It's like the layout is based on a typewriter that didn't bind. It's got
Yes,
nothing to
yeah.
do
It
with
was
like
difficult enough to type on that
uh,
the hammer.
it's just like the thing that didn't bind that everybody bought, and then it became the thing everybody uses.
Yeah, yeah.
Like you could almost say the same thing for a mouse. Like we've got one of our partners is 3D Connection, right? They make a space mouse.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, of course, I know
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
and that's like when I started using it, it was like, whoa, this is weird at first, and then after a couple hours I was like, how did I ever live without this thing? I mean, this is it's so easy to get through space with it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'd love to see you, who knows, work with them or
Yeah, no, yeah.
come up with some new UX, like industrial design hybrid thing having to do with controlling and 3D
Yeah.
space. Like I can't wait to
Yeah,
see.
I do love that, like just exploring interaction and yeah, everything from like telemetry, gyro controllers onto like, physical interface stuff. It's just so fun to work with and mess around with. And there's always different solutions. And like you can always come up with something that works, a little bit better for a broad range of people, or something that works a little bit better for specific industries, or a little bit better just for an individual person. So it's a really fun space to wait around and sort of figure out what you want to tackle. So
Well, we're all going to be watching and enjoying that as you do it. Thanks for coming, man. Great conversation.
oh, thanks, Jonathan. Man, it was great having you. Yeah, great being here. Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome hearing about your background. Like, yeah, the architectural stuff. I love hearing about people that have architectural backgrounds and environmental backgrounds. It's such a fun space to talk about. And yeah, just thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Hey, everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date with all things Shop Talk. If you're ready to try Fusion for yourself, find the link in our description.